Every story has a moment that changes everything. For Tommy and Rebecca, it wasn't a confession. It wasn't even a kiss. It was the fire in their eyes the first time they met. From that very second, it was clear this wasn't going to be a simple connection. It was going to be a storm. A storm of attraction, power, and betrayal that would pull them both into a dangerous game. This is where it all began. Tommy had built his life on control. He was sharp, calculated, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone around him. People feared him, respected him, or tried to avoid crossing his path. But when Rebecca entered his world, something shifted. She wasn't like the others who bent under his stare. Instead, she met his gaze with calm confidence, almost as if she already knew the rules of the game he played and was ready to change them. The first spark between them wasn't soft or gentle. It was charged electric, the kind of energy that makes you lean closer without realizing it. Tommy noticed the way she spoke, measured but daring, her words laced with challenge. She wasn't intimidated by his reputation, and that alone set her apart. In a world where everyone wanted to either use him or fear him, Rebecca stood her ground like she belonged right there beside him. Their first meeting was never about love at all. It was about testing limits. Tommy pushed, waiting for her to slip, waiting for her to reveal weakness. But Rebecca didn't falter. She answered every question with poise, every glance with mystery. In that moment, Tommy felt something rearranged opponent who could stand in the same arena as him. What made their connection so unforgettable was the tension. You could sense the pull between them, but you could also sense the danger. Every word they exchanged felt like a hidden promise, and every silence carried weight. It wasn't just 2 people talking, it was 2 forces colliding for Tommy. Who prided himself on seeing through people, Rebecca was different. She was unreadable, unpredictable, and yet magnetic. He couldn't figure out if she was an ally, a threat, or both. That puzzle made her irresistible. For Rebecca, Tommy represented power, but not the kind that comes from money or status. His power was personal. His presence alone could change the atmosphere of a room. And instead of being overpowered, she leaned into it. Their first spark lit a fire, one neither of them could fully control. It was attraction, yes, but it was also curiosity. It was the thrill of seeing someone who might actually match your strength and maybe even break through the walls you've built. This beginning wasn't about sweetness or safety. It was about risk. And that risk is what made Tommy and Rebecca's connection unforgettable from the very start. Attraction is powerful. But in the world of Landman, it is never just about chemistry. Every glance carries a purpose, and every smile hides a secret. From the very beginning, Tommy felt that Rebecca wasn't showing her full hand. She was too careful, too deliberate, as though every step closer to him was calculated. To others, this might have looked like charm. To Tommy, it looked like strategy. Tommy wasn't naive. He had built his reputation on reading people, tearing apart their facades until nothing was left but the truth they tried so hard to bury. But Rebecca was different. She wore her mask so well that even he struggled to see what was underneath. Sometimes she played the role of an ally, leaning in just enough to earn his trust. Other times, she pulled away, leaving questions hanging in the air. The push and pull only deepened the mystery around her. Rebecca, on the other hand, was no ordinary woman caught in Tommy's orbit. She had her own ambitions, her own scars, and her own reasons for staying close to him. To her, Tommy wasn't just a man, he was a door. A door that could open to power, to influence, to control of a world where everyone wanted a piece of the game. But standing next to Tommy came with a cost, and Rebecca knew that better than anyone. To stay close, she had to give him just enough truth to keep him hooked, while keeping the rest buried where he could never reach. Their conversations often carried double meanings. When Rebecca spoke, her words seemed warm on the surface, but sharp underneath. Tommy would catch himself analyzing every sentence, every pause, every glance. Was she being honest? Or was she setting a trap? And in those moments, he realized something dangerous. He didn't care. The very act of not knowing pulled him in deeper. For a man who thrived on control, losing clarity should have been a weakness. Yet with Rebecca, it became an addiction. The real danger of their bond lay in these hidden motives. Tommy wanted to believe he was in control, that he was simply testing her, watching her, waiting for her to reveal her true self. But in truth, Rebecca was testing him just as much. She wanted to see how far she could push, how much she could take, how much power she could hold over the one man who prided himself on being untouchable. And it worked. With every moment, Tommy found himself drawn deeper into her orbit. He told himself he was still the one steering the ship, still the one deciding the direction of their connection. But in the quiet corners of his mind, he knew Rebecca was pulling strings too. This was never just about love, never just about desire. It was a dangerous dance of motives, a silent war where both players wore masks and hid knives behind their backs. And the most unsettling part, neither of them wanted to stop, because in their world, danger wasn't something to avoid, it was the fuel that kept the fire burning. Sometimes enemies make the strongest partners. That's exactly what happened with Tommy and Rebecca. They didn't trust each other, not even for a second, but the world around them left no choice. Circumstances forced them into the same corner, and when survival was at stake, mistrust had to take a back seat. They became an alliance, fragile, volatile, dangerous, but an alliance nonetheless. For Tommy, this partnership was a risk. He knew Rebecca's words were dipped in honey, but carried venom beneath. Yet he couldn't ignore the truth. She had skills, connections, and influence that he needed. Walking away from her meant walking away from opportunities he couldn't get anywhere else. And Tommy wasn't the kind of man to let pride cost him power. For Rebecca, the alliance was a game of balance. She knew aligning with Tommy meant exposure. Everyone in Landman's world knew what he was capable of. He was sharp, ruthless, and always watching. But standing beside him also gave her protection, leverage, and an open door into places she couldn't reach alone. To Rebecca, Tommy wasn't just a partner. He was a weapon. A weapon she could point at anyone standing in her way, as long as she didn't let him turn on her first, together. They formed a strange kind of chemistry that went beyond attraction. When they spoke to others, it was like they were reading from the same script, even when they hadn't planned it. They moved as if they could anticipate each other's next move. That synchronicity wasn't trusted, was necessity. In their world, hesitation meant weakness, and weakness meant death. But beneath that polished teamwork, the cracks showed. When no one was watching, their conversations were laced with sharp edges. Tommy would remind her that betrayal had consequences, and Rebecca would respond with a sly smile that said she wasn't afraid. Their partnership wasn't built on loyalty, but on a fragile thread of shared interest, and everyone knew it could snap at any moment. What made their alliance unforgettable was the tension it carried. Viewers could feel it in every scene, to people standing side by side, working toward the same goal, while secretly wondering who would strike first. It was like watching two predators hunt together, knowing full well that once the prey was gone, they might turn on each other. This unlikely alliance blurred every line. Were they partners? Were they enemies? Were they something more? The truth is, they were all of it at once. And that's what made Tommy and Rebecca such a dangerous pair. When they worked together, they were unstoppable. But when they turned on each other, the damage was catastrophic. Every alliance has an expiration date. And with Tommy and Rebecca, it was always written in fire. The longer they worked together, the more obvious it became that trust was nothing but an illusion. For every moment of unity, there was a shadow of betrayal waiting to strike. And in the world they lived in, betrayal was not a surprise, it was a guarantee. Tommy started to notice the cracks first. A missed meeting. A conversation that didn't add up. A promise that felt rehearsed rather than real. He had seen this pattern before in others, but with Rebecca, it cut deeper. He wanted to believe in her, but believing in Rebecca was like holding smoke. You could try to grasp it, but it would slip away, leaving only emptiness in your hand. Rebecca, on the other hand, was no stranger to playing both sides. Her survival depended on it. She knew Tommy was watching her every move, yet she continued to dance close to the fire. Some might call it reckless. For Rebecca, it was power. By keeping Tommy guessing, she stayed one step ahead. Her betrayals weren't sloppy mistakes. They were calculated moves in a game where emotion was the most dangerous weakness. The tension between them grew unbearable. When they spoke, the words were laced with double meanings. Tommy's voice carried warning, sharp and deliberate, while Rebecca's replies were smooth, playful, almost mocking. It was a duel fought not with weapons, but with words, glances, and silences heavy enough to choke the air. And then came the moments when betrayal was no longer hidden. A deal Rebecca made behind his back. A choice she made that cost him control. Tommy's fury was like thunder, sudden and violent, but Rebecca never flinched. Instead, she looked him in the eye, as if daring him to decide, would he destroy her, or would he admit that he still needed her? That defiance made her betrayal sting even more, because it showed she wasn't afraid of losing him. For the audience, these betrayals weren't just plot twists. They were proof of how fragile their bond had always been. They pulled us deeper into the storm, making us question with Tommy. Was Rebecca ever truly with him? Or had she always been using him, feeding off his trust, while setting him up for the fall? And yet, despite the betrayal, neither of them walked away. The tension didn't break them apart, tied them even tighter. Like two snakes coiled around the same branch, each waiting for the other to strike first. Betrayal became part of their rhythm, part of what made their relationship so intoxicating and so destructive at the same time. This was not love in its purest form. It was survival, wrapped in desire, passion poisoned by suspicion. And the deeper they sank into it, the clearer it became betrayal wasn't the end of their story. It was the fuel that kept it alive. Passion and betrayal can't live side by side without tearing people apart. For Tommy and Rebecca, every argument carried the weight of both. One moment they were standing too close, their words heavy with desire, and the next, they were shouting like enemies caught in an endless war. It wasn't just anger, and it wasn't just love. It was something in between, something far more dangerous. Tommy wasn't used to losing control. He built his life on strength, on silence, on keeping his feelings locked away where no one could touch them. But Rebecca broke through those walls. She had the rare power to drag emotion out of him, to force him to feel when he wanted nothing more than to remain untouchable. When she betrayed him, his anger wasn't cold. It was burning, personal, raw. And when she leaned closer, it wasn't strategy that pulled him in. It was need. Rebecca, for all her secrets, wasn't immune either. She played the part of the manipulator, the strategist, the woman who always had an escape plan. Yet when she looked at Tommy, there were cracks in her armor. The way her voice softened mid-argument, the way her eyes lingered a second, to long it betrayed something she didn't want to admit. She wasn't just using him. She was drawn to him, even when it made no sense. Even when it put her at risk. Their emotional conflicts were battles without winners. They fought with words, but underneath every harsh exchange was the same truth. They couldn't walk away. Tommy accused her of lies. Rebecca accused him of control. And still, after every storm, they circled back to each other, unable to sever the tie. It was toxic, magnetic, and unshakable all at once. What made these conflicts unforgettable was the vulnerability hidden in the chaos. Tommy's voice breaking, just for a moment, as if anger wasn't enough to cover the wound. Rebecca's silence when she could have lied, as if a part of her wanted him to see the truth. These were the glimpses that showed us their bond wasn't only built on power, it was also built on pain, on longing, on something deeper they couldn't name. For the audience, these moments of raw emotion were both heartbreaking and thrilling. We weren't watching a love story in its purest form. We were watching two people collide, break and rebuild in ways that made no sense but felt impossible to look away from. Their conflicts weren't just arguments. They were proof that even the strongest masks crack when emotions take over. In the end, Rebecca's emotional battles defined them. They were too proud to admit love, too hurt to walk away, and too connected to let go. It was the kind of bond that destroyed just as much as it created damned. That's why it will always remain unforgettable. Love was never simple for Tommy and Rebecca. In truth, it was never really love at all. It was a war disguised as desire. Every glance between them carried a challenge. Every word was a test. and every touch was a reminder that neither of them wanted to surrender. Their relationship wasn't built on balance. It was built on power, and in their world, power was the only thing that mattered. Tommy had always been the one in control. He commanded rooms with his presence, silenced enemies with a single word, and made people fall in line without lifting a finger. But Rebecca was different. She refused to bend. She refused to let his shadow consume her. Instead, she stood toe-to-toe with him, matching his fire with fire of her own. And for Tommy, that was both maddening and magnetic. Every argument between them became a tug-of-war. Tommy would try to dominate with his sharp words and iron will, but Rebecca never allowed herself to be cornered. She would push back, clever and fearless, twisting his own logic against him. To her, every confrontation was a battlefield, and every victory, no matter how small, proved that she wasn't just another pawn in his game. What made their power struggles so gripping was the unpredictability. Sometimes Tommy won, silencing her with forceful control, leaving no room for defiance. Other times, Rebecca won, leaving him speechless with a move he never saw coming. Neither of them held dominance for long. It shifted constantly, like waves crashing against each other in a storm. And that storm became the rhythm of their bond. But beneath the struggle was something even more complex. Their fight for control wasn't just about pride, it was about fear. For Tommy, giving Rebecca too much power meant risking betrayal that could destroy him. For Rebecca, surrendering to Tommy meant losing herself completely in a world where men like him consumed everything they touched. Each of them fought not only to dominate the other, but also to protect themselves from being destroyed. The irony was that their battles only pulled them closer. Every clash, every challenge, every sharp exchange of words created a tension that neither could escape. They hated losing to each other, but they craved the fight itself. Power became the very thing that bound them, destructive, consuming, but impossible to let go of. To the audience, these power struggles revealed the core truth of Tommy and Rebecca's bond. It was never about harmony. It's never about peace. It was about survival, desire, and control. And in the end, neither of them truly wanted to win, because if one of them ever did, the war would be over. And for Tommy and Rebecca, the war was the only thing keeping the fire alive. Every secret eventually demands to be uncovered. And with Tommy and Rebecca, the reveal was inevitable. Their entire bond had been built on tension, mistrust, and shadows, but there comes a moment when shadows break under the weight of the truth. And when Tommy finally saw Rebecca's betrayal for what it was, the impact was like a blade straight to the heart. For Tommy, betrayal wasn't new. He had been crossed, cheated, and lied to countless times before. But Rebecca's betrayal was different. It wasn't just about a deal gone wrong or a secret meeting behind his back. It was personal. She wasn't just another player in his game. She was the one person who had managed to slip past his guard, the one person he had allowed to close. And that's what made her deception cut deeper than any wound he had ever known. The scene played out like a storm. Tommy's anger was volcanic, erupting in every word, every movement. His voice carried the weight of betrayal and heartbreak all at once. He demanded answers, but deep down, he already knew them. Rebecca's actions had spoken louder than anything she could say. Still, what shook him most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the calm way she faced him afterward. Rebecca didn't beg. She didn't crumble. She stood firm, her eyes locked on his, as if daring him to do his worst. To her, betrayal wasn't weakness. It was survival. She had made her move, knowing it might destroy everything between them, but that was the price she was willing to pay. And in that moment, she showed Tommy a truth he didn't want to admit. She had never belonged to him. Not fully. Not completely. She had always belonged to herself. The audience could feel the weight of this reveal. It wasn't just a twist in the story, it was the breaking point. Every suspicion, every warning, every small crack in their relationship had led here. And now, with the truth out in the open, there was no going back. But what made this betrayal unforgettable was the complexity of their reactions. Tommy, despite his rage, couldn't let go of the pull he still felt toward her. Even as he swore to destroy her, A part of him still ached with the memory of what they had shared. And Rebecca, despite her defiance, couldn't entirely hide the flicker of pain in her eyes. She had betrayed him, yes, but in doing so, she had betrayed herself too. This reveal wasn't just the end of trust, it was the start of something even darker. With masks ripped away and wounds laid bare, Tommy and Rebecca's bond transformed. It was no longer about hidden motives or silent games. Now it was raw, exposed, and dangerous in a way it had never been before. The betrayal didn't end their story, it made it explode. Every story has a symbol. For Tommy and Rebecca, it was always the snake. A creature that slips between shadows, beautiful but deadly, silent until it strikes. Their bond was never soft or innocent. It was venom wrapped in silk. And like a snake, it carried both temptation and danger in every movement. Rebecca was the snake in Tommy's life. She was alluring, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Every time she drew near, he felt the pull, even as his instincts screamed to keep his distance. She spoke with charm, moved with grace, and carried secrets in her eyes. But just like a snake, her beauty hid fangs sharp enough to draw blood. Tommy knew this, yet he couldn't resist reaching for her again and again. But the snake wasn't only Rebecca. Tommy carried his own venom too. His control, his dominance, his sharp words he struck with precision, leaving no room for weakness. In many ways, he was a predator himself, coiling around those who dared to challenge him. When he and Rebecca clashed, it wasn't predator versus prey, it was two snakes locked in the same circle, each ready to strike, each refusing to back down. The snake symbol also revealed the temptation of their bond. Just as a snake lures with silence before it attacks, Tommy and Rebecca's relationship lured them both deeper into danger. Every kiss, every whispered word, every betrayal all carried poison, but neither of them cared. They were addicted to the risk, to the thrill of being close to something that could destroy them. For the audience, the snake imagery made their story unforgettable. We could see it in Rebecca's sly smiles, in Tommy's calculating stares, in the way they circled each other with both hunger and caution. Theirs wasn't a love story, it was a story of survival, of two forces entwined in a venomous embrace, and just like a snake, their bond shed its skin again and again. From attraction to alliance, from betrayal to passion. They kept reinventing what they were, each time leaving behind something broken, but creating something new. Yet underneath every new layer, the truth remained the same. Theirs was a bond that could never be trusted, only feared, desired, and remembered. In the end, the snake wasn't just a symbol of Rebecca or Tommy. It was the essence of what they shared deadly. Dangerous, yet mesmerizing. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful connections carry the sharpest bite. Even the strongest walls have cracks. And even the sharpest predators have moments when their guard slips. For Tommy and Rebecca, those rare glimpses of weakness revealed the truth beneath all the fire, the lies, and the power games. Beneath it all, there were still two people searching for something real, even if they could never admit it out loud. For Tommy, weakness was something he swore he would never show. His reputation, his control, his very survival depended on it. But around Rebecca, moments came when his mask faltered. It could be in the quiet after an argument, when his voice dropped lower, not to intimidate, but because the fight had drained him. It could be in the silence of a stare, when his anger gave way to something softer, something almost like longing. In those fleeting moments, Tommy wasn't the unshakable man everyone feared. He was human, hurt, conflicted, and dangerously close to admitting he cared. Rebecca's weakness was different. She had spent her life perfecting the art of deception, slipping in and out of roles like second skin. But with Tommy, sometimes the performance cracked. There were times when her eyes betrayed what her words tried to hide, when the confidence in her tone slipped and revealed exhaustion, regret, or even guilt. She never allowed herself to cry in front of him. But the heaviness in her silence spoke louder than tears ever could. What made these moments powerful was their rarity. They didn't last long, just seconds, sometimes only a glance, but they were enough. enough to remind us that their bond wasn't just about venom and fire. It was about two people caught between who they were and who they could have been if the world and their choices had been different. For the audience, these cracks in their armor were magnetic. We leaned in, desperate to catch every flicker of softness, every glimpse of the people hiding beneath the masks. It made us wonder, was there ever a chance for them to be something real? Or were these moments of weakness just illusions, tricks of the light in a story destined to end in fire? In truth, these small vulnerabilities were both a blessing and a curse. They tied Tommy and Rebecca closer, reminding them of the pull they couldn't escape. But they also made the betrayals cut deeper, the power struggles sharper, 'cause now we knew there was something real beneath all the chaos. Something fragile that neither of them could hold on to for long. Their moments of weakness didn't save them, but they made their story unforgettable. Because sometimes, the most powerful scenes aren't the ones filled with rage or desire. They're the ones where silence reveals the pain no one dares to speak.